Hi everybody, and welcome to today's ISC webinar, brought to you today in conjunction with our partners, Capfinity. I'm really excited about today's content. We've got a really good session lined up and a great selection of panelists across multiple time zones, which always adds an interest factor. And it's great to be catching up with David Bearfield. We've not seen each other for quite a long time, but we'll come to introductions later. Nikki will do those as we get through the session. As with all our webinars, we really would like your participation. So please pop any questions as we go along into the chat function. I'll keep an eye on them and we'll be able to come back to those at the end. But I know Nikki is also going to keep an eye on them. So if they're pertinent, as we're going through the session content, we will drop them in as we go along. We will be recording the session, and you will also get a copy of the slides. So those will come to you on email afterwards. Be great actually. So you can catch up if there's anything that you want to revisit, but also of course share those amongst your team members, because I know we're going to have some really good content, so it's good to get those learnings out there to as broad a population as possible. I think that's all you need to hear from me. I mean, it's the rest of the gang that you really want to hear from. So Nikki, can I hand over to you?
Thanks so much, Stephen, and welcome everyone if you're listening live or listening back to the session. My name's Nikki Garchea and I am one of the co-founders of Capfinity and also the Chief Customer Officer. And I've had the great pleasure of playing the executive sponsor role on our work with UNDP. So very briefly about Capfinity, we work with about 250 brands globally. I am really getting on a bit now because we were founded in 2005 and we have over 100, Stephen's laughing, he's like, yeah, I remember her pre-wrinkles. We have 150 people working with us and that's growing all the time. If you're interested, please apply. There's definitely a talent shortage. And we have a great number of IO psychologists and I'm delighted to have one of our US psychologists, Stephen, on this call as well. We've got offices around the globe in the UK, in Ireland, in the US and Australia. And a fun fact is that someone takes a Capfinity assessment every minute of every day. And after working with David and Mavis and the team, that's certainly increasing as well. So just briefly, in terms of what we wanted to cover today, we really wanted to share the story and our learnings of this quite extraordinary project delivered in quite incredible timeframes. And it's very much work in progress. So I hope that you will be able to listen in and hear things that might resonate with your own practice. And please do ask questions. It's really an interesting case that we're going to go through with you and that the team are going to share today. I'm going to play compare and let the rest of the panel give comment. But essentially, we wanted to just talk about why this program was set up, and David's going to run you through how that met some of the people strategy for UNDP. And Mavis and Stephen are going to talk about how they partnered together with their respective teams to design and build and deploy an assessment process in just shy of 90 days. And then we'll share some of the emerging results. I think final candidates were decided upon in September. So we have candidate feedback and some of the business feedback, and just to share a couple of pen portraits of some of the people that have come through this process. So it would be great, David, for you to share a little bit about your fantastic role and what you get up to, and then we'll move on to Mavis.
Thank you very much, Nikki and Stephen. I'm delighted to be here today. I'm the Director of Human Resources for the United Nations Development Programme. I'll say a word about that in a second. Before that, I've been working in lots of different roles in the public sector for more than 30 years, so I'm much older than you, Nikki, starting the UK Civil Service and Diplomatic Service, followed by 25 years working for the European Union, based in Brussels, where for the last 11 I was the director of the recruitment operation for the entire EU system, which brought me into contact with the then AGR, which I was proud to be a board director of for a while. It seems a long time ago now, in ISE's previous incarnation. And then just over 3 years ago, I joined UNDP as HR director. UNDP is the leading development operation of the United Nations system. We have over 20,000 employees around the world, and we're operating in 170 countries. So we have just about the largest footprint of any part of the UN system, and delivering a huge number of assistance, development programs and projects, helping governments and societies around the world with the motto, leaving no one behind. And so our job is to support this huge and dynamic operation to deliver and to really focus on meeting the UN's Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. And in that context, I was hired to really bring about a transformation of human resources, the whole system within UNDP. And so we've launched a huge project in 2019 called People for 2030, linked really to the business goals of the organization, but a root and branch transformation of all of our systems, policies, processes. And the aim is to transform our culture and accelerate tremendously our capacity to deliver.
Thanks, David. And Mavis.
Thank you, Nikki. So my name is Mavis Ossé, and I work in the outposted part of the Human Resources Office for UNDP. So I'm located in Copenhagen, and the team that I work with, we are focused mainly on early talent and attracting talent into UNDP, and a couple of other things that we do at a corporate level. So I'm really delighted to be here today and looking forward to talking about our experience on this journey.
Wonderful. And then Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. So I am Stephen Mueller. I work on Capfinity's consulting team. I'm based here in the United States in Texas, and had the good fortune to work closely with Mavis and her UNDP team. My responsibilities for the project were the science, so designing the assessments. By background, I'm an industrial organizational psychologist, and have spent my entire career helping organizations leverage assessments for pre-hire initiatives, talent acquisition, as well as post-hire initiatives, succession planning, coaching and development. So it's great to be here today, and look forward to, as Nikki said, Mavis and I will provide some color commentary on how we deployed this assessment solution in about 90 days. So it's great to be here today. Thank you, Nikki.
Thanks, Stephen. So we'll start at the beginning, and we'll get David to pick up on that bit. David, this programme had, I guess, huge implications for helping you get closer to the 2030 vision for the UNDP. But would you just share a little bit about your vision for the programme and how it sits with the organisational vision?
Yeah, thanks. And I mentioned the transformation of HR, and we have, and you can see from the slide here, a very kind of comprehensive program. You know, whilst UNDP was delivering great things, I think we'd fallen some way behind in terms of how we actually manage and use, you know, our fantastic workforce that we have. And so I was hired in really to lead this transformation project. And we called it People for 2030 because we really wanted to link it firmly to the main kind of, you know, strategic objective of our organization, to bring those SDGs to life. And we spent 6 or 7 months looking across the organization to really try and diagnose, you know, what the issues were in terms of human resources. And we came up with the 9 focus areas that you can see here. And what's really important about them is, firstly, they're all interlinked. You can't, you know, tinker with one part. It's not going to solve the problem. You really have to deal with things in a holistic way. And we're trying to get down as well to the root causes of problems. And that's where really one of these, where our graduate program came in, because we're a development organization first and foremost. Nearly all of our staff are in the field, around 95% of our staff in the field, most of them, of course, as you would expect, in the global south. But when it comes to finding a way into our organization, people from the global south, I think, often found it very difficult. There was not an obvious path in contrast to our fantastic junior professional officer program, which offers a fairly clearly signposted way in for people from 10 or a dozen countries from the north who are the donor countries who fund that program and hire, generally speaking, not exclusively, generally speaking, their nationals to come. So if you're fortunate and you come from one of those countries and you're selected, you can come for a great 3 to 4 year program in UNDP, and at the end of it, around 2/3 of them are picked up either here or in the UN system and join our staff. If you come from the south, it's very different. And many people start working in our local offices as local staff members, and it's quite a long and not obvious route in. And we saw, in terms of diversity, it was really important for us to try and fix that problem and create a real pipeline for that talent, and not just to bring people from our program countries, and particularly targeting the 50 or so least represented countries, but we wanted to get diversity of people as well, not just geographical diversity. We wanted people, for whom, the work of UNDP has a resonance, maybe even a personal resonance in terms of having helped, their own communities, their families, their countries. And so we've also really set out to bring some different kinds of people into the mix. In terms of social mobility, for example, and we've really tried to attract people and select people who are the first in their family to have gone to university, people who have a disability, people from an indigenous population, and also people who've actually studied in their home country, not simply people who had the resources to go and study in the global north. So we really wanted to bring in people geographically from a different part of the world, but in terms of society, from not always what you could call the usual suspects, who you might find their way into to the United Nations. And I just look back, now my own example, admittedly having grown up in the UK, but having benefited from great schools, free libraries, free university. Imagine that. We actually got paid to go to university. And in that sense, benefiting from that fantastic red carpet that was rolled out for me and isn't there for many other people. And I think it's important, for people who've had to overcome huge obstacles already, that we don't put more in their way, that we actually, welcome them and give them a route in to this organization. And I think if I put myself back in that position, kind of leaving school, and somebody said I'd end up working for United Nations, I'd have laughed. It just wouldn't have been on my horizon as something that I could possibly do one day. And I think it's really important that we give people that kind of aspiration.
Thanks, David. And will you just share a little bit from the vision and the strategy and the vision that you had for the programme? Where do you take it from there? So you have this idea, that you want to go ahead. What happens next?
Well, having worked in recruitment and graduate recruitment, for some time, in previous roles with the EU, I think it gave me at least an idea of where we needed to be heading for this. And I think the other really important thing was the team that Mavis is in is already leading our junior professional officer program that we actually run across the whole UN system. And so we could see what good looked like, because that's a very successful program. And we wanted really to say, how could we adapt that for a different population? Particularly there, it's going to be important to focus more perhaps on development and training needs than for some others. But frankly, that was the inspiration we had. So we had something to go on. And I think, what was really important was to keep that, what we wanted in mind in terms of how we could get different kinds of people and not just put something out there and get the same old. That I think is the danger, that you could simply put something out there and you will end up with the same kind of people that you always got from the same countries even. So we had to be very clear about our focus and putting that together. So I think we had the team in place that I thought could deliver that, and we had the template to go off, and that was really our starting point.
Brilliant. So Mavis, this seems like a good point for you and Stephen to come in. We've heard the vision and where it sits, but it's your team whose desk it crosses for the pickup and the delivery. Will you just tell everyone just like the size of the team, the fact this isn't your day job, just to give a little bit of colour to actually the task at hand?
Are you referring to the team then that was working solely on the graduate program, or are you
yeah, tell us a bit about the size of the team.
Okay, well, the team that David has referred to, the talent acquisition team, we're about 25, I think it is, including all the interns and so on. And largely we focus on donor programs and other programs that are not sort of entirely in control of UNDP. So when with this vision that David had, I have to say we were excited about it, because we do have a few donors that fund people from other countries, and so we've had a bit of practice, and it was incredible how everybody was behind it, and I have to say that's also followed through. But the team, so we have a team that is specialized in partnerships, a team that's specialized in outreach, and those who do the actual recruitment as well. So although the graduate team is very small, it's mostly Luca, who's the chief of the team, and me, and half of another person. So we're very small, but we're housed in a team that really has a lot of experience, and we're able to all pull together. So that's basically the story of those who are behind the graduate program.
Brilliant. So if anyone's listening in, just hold in mind that we've got 2.5 people in this team. 2.5 incredible people, but 2.5 people. And so you've got this program, time is ticking on, you go through the selection process. We're fortunate enough to be selected. And it's the only time I've ever done a 15-minute pitch. I sat my stopwatch and recorded myself and practiced. But we get to meet as a team. You've got a very, very short space of time to basically design with us a whole assessment process end to end, but do a lot of the selection yourselves. What are some of your hopes and fears at that point?
Well, even if I say we have a lot of recruitment with young talent, the graduate program was still something that was new for us. So we'd had to do a lot of research, and there was a certain amount of trepidation about that also, that could we actually deliver? And as David said, would we end up with the usual suspects, or would we actually be able to do the outreach and get the target populations that we were aiming for? I think that the fact that we have a program, or that we were talking about a program that was so easy to sell to people, everybody got behind it in the organization. So we realized that we had the opportunity to test things out as well, to do other types of selection processes that maybe UNDP hadn't done before. And I should have said also that because of the young talent population, we have been able to, in the past as well, test out different types of recruitment, different selection approaches. So we were delighted that Capfinity had a great focus on the candidate experience. That was really important to us. It was really important to us that the tests that would be used, there wouldn't be any adverse impact of such testing. We wanted it to be as inclusive as possible. We wanted our outreach to be really as global as possible as well, in order to reach the hidden talent. So it was great fun, also working with Stephen, that you did have a lot of experience in graduate programs, and in this particular population, which we didn't have. And that really did bring, I think, an added gift, so that we could be as inclusive as possible, because that was really a big part of our aim.
Thank you. And I think Mavis has been very humble about the challenge that she had in front of her. So we'll dig in
Definitely.
a bit more, because there's some big numbers to put against that team. One of the things that you mentioned was just the global reach. And I think for many organisations, even those that are ISE members based in the UK, are struggling with sourcing candidates. Your challenge was that you were also going to need to source candidates at a global level and across countries that probably aren't targeted quite as heavily for graduate recruitment. Would you just share any of the practical things that you and the team did to help source those candidates?
Well, I mean, we're lucky to be part of a big machine. The UNDP, as David said, we're located in 170 locations globally. So we were able to, reach out through our country offices and the staff there who know the local markets. They know what works. They know what social media is the most active. They know about the academic institutions. They know the profiles that UNDP is interested in. And so we could actually tap into that diversity that the organization already has. And that was brilliant. So while we were able to, our outreach team here in Copenhagen was able to come up with different resources and come up with different ideas that we thought might be useful. Through then having webinars with the different regions, we were able to really engage and get more confidence that we're actually going to be able to reach the right people. So those resources that we built here, they were able to customize them locally, reach out to the relevant places and really extend the network that we had.
Yeah, an incredible activity. I'm going to bring Stephen in now to just share some of the thoughts that you had when building the assessment, and I'll see if I can screen share and ask the question at the same time. One of the things we've heard Mavis really dig into, and David mentioned it at the start, was the diversity, the inclusion, social mobility. Would you just share some of the thoughts that you and the Capfinity team had in terms of what you needed to put together? And I guess as an IA psychologist with 20 years experience, some of the things you were watching for.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to, Nikki. I'll try to do it justice. It was as Mavis very humbly said, I mean, it was a Herculean effort with the Capfinity team, Mavis and her team, just lots of people involved and just moving very quickly. So from, Nikki, as you say, a psychology perspective, there's, 5 things, we're thinking about: validity, cost, legal issues, candidate experience, and end user experience. And we're trying to effectively, balance all 5 of those levers. And quickly we realized in meeting, as is a good consulting practice, what are your KPIs? And Mavis and team always came back to, it has to work and we have to have diversity. We can't sacrifice one for the other. So Nikki, I think that was the driver. So I was clearly concerned with the legal issues and the validity. I know David early on when we crossed paths was very interested in as much off-the-shelf content. So Mavis, as you said, Capfinity has a long history with early career graduate work. So we were able to leverage a lot of our pre-existing content. We did a heavy dose of customization through a lot of focus group activity. Mavis, as she smiles, trying to think back, coordinating these focus groups from different locations around the world. So we heavily contextualized our assessments through focus groups and input from various business units, various parts of the world. We did leverage our pre-existing content as much as possible because we know that it's valid and going to work. And at the risk of being, anticlimactic, it worked. We didn't have a situation where our assessment scores were competing with diversity. I never had to go to Mavis and team and say, well, we're going to have to make some allowances here, right? We don't have any diversity at the top of the funnel, so to speak. So I worked closely with Mavis to figure out the diversity requirements. As David said in his opening, he listed a lot of the diversity requirements: first-time college, nationality. In total, there were 10 different diversity requirements. 7 of them were must-have, 3 of them were nice to have. So we had to collectively agree on how we were going to categorize this information and how we would present it back to the UN, because ultimately we had to decide who would move forward. So looking at your slide here, Nikki, I can see that you've got the progression here. We had to make some decisions, where to draw lines in the data. So we definitely kept an eye on validity and diversity, and happy to say that we met the diversity requirements. Mavis, I can certainly defer to you. I know you and team had a lot of discussions. We would meet about this, and you and your team would meet. But I mean, that's it. I don't want to be too long-winded here, but there's just a lot to say about this solution. There was a lot of moving parts and a lot of people involved, but happy to say that we were able to check both boxes. We delivered candidates that had the potential to perform the UNDP competencies and the diversity. And perhaps I should have said that earlier. We anchored this entire solution in the UNDP competencies. They had a brand new competency framework that we were able to leverage, so that definitely expedited our work. So Mavis, anything to add, or Nikki? Not sure where to go from there.
I think one point I could add is, before you get to the 4,000, you can see on the slides, we actually had 38,000 applications. So Mavis and her 1.5 colleagues had to get from 38,000 to 4,000. I'm still not quite sure how they managed.
Yeah, Mavis, I was trying to think back what the number was initially. I know we thought that there might be, you may know the number, maybe 10,000 or something.
Yeah, we knew that from a previous attempt, we knew that it would likely be over 6,000. We'd had 6,000 before, and we were dreading that it might reach 10,000. So yes, after the first week, we had over 22,000 applications, which was very good for UNDP. It meant that we do have a brand that is also relevant in these young populations, because that hadn't been tested out before either. So we were still relevant. We clearly should be able to find the hidden talent. But then, as you say, how do you get from a huge number to a number that you can start dealing with? And I can say yes, we did put in an awful lot of work. We're lucky that we also have different offices, different corporate offices within UNDP that we could consult and agree on what the priorities would be and where the focuses should be. So this had already happened before we saw the numbers, and that's really good. So we can say that we're completely transparent about it. We had sort of levels of how severe a focus we would need to put in according to the size. Yes, 38,000, as you said, in an incredibly short time. It's not really something that I want to recommend as as a way to go, and both designing and developing at the same time as implementing. It was tough at times, but and I know it was tough also on the Capfinity side.
Well, we did have a few more people than you did. And I think the one thing for me, is someone that's worked in this space for a long time, was just to repeat, you'd got 22,000 applicants in the first week, and you'd got to that 38,000 really in 21 days. So you talk about the UNDP being relevant, but the volume was really, really quite staggering. Stephen, just before we go to Mavis on kind of the accessibility and some of the things that they did, would you share a little bit? Clearly, UNDP's got this beautiful kind of branding, but the thinking behind having a narrative that evolved or kind of was shared with the candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we wanted to do was really bring the UNDP organization to life. So it's very common in the industry to use, I call them, personality forms, right? You have a bunch of, Likert type items, strongly agree to strongly disagree, and it's just item after item after item. Very common, not the best candidate experience. So we wanted to do something different for UNDP. We wanted to create a really immersive experience. So with Captivate, we wanted to bring the organization to life. So what we did was introduced graduates. We basically profiled, I believe it was Mavis, 3 different graduates. We had a graduate profile that discussed who the person was. And that way the candidate could see themselves in that person's shoes. So who they were, country of origin, the degree they pursued. Think about it as a glorified LinkedIn profile. And then a little bit of history, what they were doing in 2018, 2019, 2020. So it was just a chronology of what that person was doing. So we really wanted to bring the organization and the program to life. And then with Simulate, we further contextualized and we tried to bring the job to life. Talked about different projects, a lot of the sustainable development that David referenced earlier, how we wanted to understand how candidates would help these sustainable projects, like build, rainforests or, farming, how to do, green initiatives. We had several projects set up in the assessment that were real and very close to the UNDP. So the candidates could get a really good, for lack of a better phrase, a realistic job preview of what it's like to work there. And then ultimately that led into the virtual assessment centers. So ultimately, Capfinity is able to create these, immersive experiences. We've got some feedback I'm sure we'll share here shortly that candidates enjoy the assessments. They are a little bit longer than a traditional, 15-minute personality assessment, but they can be longer because they're immersive, and we get better data from candidates, which helps us on the validity. Candidates can be very, authentic. They can tell us who they are. They can tell us what they like, their work preferences. So we also use a variety of item types. It's not just, Likert type items, 200 Likert items that you blast through in 15 minutes. But yeah, that was a solution, Nikki.
Thanks, Stephen. Mavis, one of the things that people often ask me when they embark on global programs is this concern around being able to access an assessment. Would you share some of the things that you did to make sure people had good access?
Thank you, Nikki. Yes, well, as you said, we wanted to attract a very diverse group of candidates. So one of the things was accessibility for different types of disability. And so that was, we were very pleased to see that Capfinity was able to build these checks in, or actually already had these checks, so that candidates that had a type of disability would be able to inform, and we could customize either the actual test or find a different one. We had a very high insistence for the first 2 stages that the tests should be mobile friendly, because while we know that some of the candidates we were trying to reach were out in rather remote areas. Globally, mobile access is very common. So it was great that the first two different phases could be responded to on a mobile phone. And then for the assessment center, we had a virtual assessment center, as I mentioned, for half a day. And for that, we had the possibility and made the offer in one or two cases that we could pull on other UN offices in the country where candidates who otherwise were concerned about getting connectivity for long enough to be able to fully participate in the assessment centers. So again, we were able to tap into this already huge network of UN offices, not only UNDP, but also other UN organizations. So that that possibility was also a real help. I have to say we're actually very, very impressed that connectivity was, I mean, not as huge an issue as we had anticipated. We'd been really quite nervous about the assessment centers, and they all, almost without fault, worked very, very well. Where there were issues, we were able to work around them. The Capfinity team that was facilitating were great, or we were able to put in a subsequent session for just two candidates. It was, so actually it was pretty impressive, and I think it's one of, I know we're going to get to the learnings, but it's encouraging that this is these are new times, that even if we're talking about the global south and the global north, that it was possible for there to be this accessibility for the widest range of candidates.
Thanks, Mavis. And I think that will really resonate with many people who are wondering at these times what to do, kind of face to face and not. I'm going to go back to the slides just briefly now and bring David in. David, Mavis and Stephen mentioned we had some lovely candidate feedback, enough that when I read it, I wondered if one of either of our teams had gone in and written it, because it was so nice, and there's a lot of it. But tell us a little bit about the sort of stakeholder feedback, how things now sit. You've got these 33 recruits. How is the business feeling, or how's the organization feeling?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, on the feedback, you're right. You kind of couldn't make it up, really. And I think, according to Mavis as well, some of the really positive comments were people who didn't pass, actually. But I think that's always for me an interesting measure, that when you get really positive feedback from people who didn't make it, I think very, very interesting. And so we're going to be, spreading the news about this already. I think in terms of presenting the CVs of the successful candidates, we're getting a very positive response right from across all of our different bureaus in which UNDP is organized into. And I think when they all see them, they'll be really, really very positive indeed about it. And I, 2 weeks ago, presented a few more than the slides you're seeing today to the head of UNDP, Achim Steiner, who's been very supportive. He's been behind, our People for 2030 project, but he was really delighted to see this and to see, the CVs of some of the people that we've been selecting. And you could see, that for the business leader, this is really, developing, putting into practice, what we've been preaching, and really positive for the organization. So yeah, I hope that as we now roll this news out across the rest of the organization and all the senior leadership team, that you know, people will be even more enthusiastic, and I hope that therefore this will also create the momentum to move out of the pilot to expand this greatly across UNDP.
Thanks, David. You have collated as a team some really great diversity stats. Would you just share with us a couple of the highlights and maybe something of your learnings as well?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, the what's amazing is when you look at, you know, the 33, and again, think about that in terms of 38,000 to 33 individuals. I think that statistically would generate a huge amount of noise, or however you want to call it. And I think to actually try and land that with a small number of people where you haven't kind of just tried to fake the results to get the people you wanted, which is easy to do, but that wasn't done, right? It's the best people that came out of this process. So I think it shows how well designed and executed the selection process is, that this is the result you get. So when you're dealing with this huge population, you drill it down to a tiny number of people, and actually, you know, you get, this is what you're getting as a result. And you can see that we've ended up with people from a total of 22 nationalities from all across the regions in which UNDP is operating. We have a very good gender balance, which is important. In terms of education, I think it's interesting, it's not only people with master's degrees, because whilst many people these days do have a master's, often for some people they simply can't afford to do it. And I think it's important that we don't exclude people simply you know, because they only had a bachelor's level degree. So I think on that level already some of the headline data is very interesting. I think if you click on to the next slide, you'll be able to see some of the other things that we were looking for. So one of the areas we're looking for in terms of professional competence, that we are looking at people either who are delivering program or projects, or are doing all of the operations work to make that happen. And what was interesting as well is that we got a mix of those, but a good selection of people that have a background in both, which is actually really, really good. So a very good spread professionally. We have two of the candidates, successful candidates, who are living with disability. 30% fully of the successful candidates identified as belonging to an Indigenous peoples group. And 57% are the first generation in their family to obtain a university degree. As indeed was I. So I think that's really great that when you look at that, we've absolutely hit the spot on all of those key metrics.
Just share a little bit the nationalities in the pool. It's quite something when you see these countries. Can you just share, Mavis and David, a little bit about the pool of candidates?
Exactly. So I mean, you know, you see this really great spread here from around the world. You know, from you know, some of our core program countries. You know, some of them you can say you know, maybe in a slightly better position from others, but from somebody to come from Yemen and succeed in a country that's being, you know, ravaged by conflict. It would be so great to be able to give, you know, somebody from that country that kind of opportunity. And you know, I meet regularly our colleagues. I have town halls several times a month with our country offices around the world to see what the pulse is, and to see the enthusiasm, but also to hear about, you know, the difficulties that people are facing on an everyday basis. And I think it's great, even, you know, if people who come from some of our program countries, they come and have this great experience and go back, I hope they will be able to really contribute to their country of origin as well on the basis of their experience from us. So I think, you know, it's really encouraging that, you know, we see such a broad spread from all sorts of different countries around the world. In particular, all of those are countries where we have very few people in our international professional staff category. So that's another really important bonus, that in that category of our personnel, more the career personnel here in the organization, that we're giving those people a chance.
So before we embark on questions, I'd love some key learning from each of you, and David, maybe you first. Anything kind of taking away from this experience, and what's next?
Well, I think that for me, a key learning point was it worked, albeit thanks to the fantastic work of Mavis and the few colleagues, and leveraging help from the rest of the organisation and our own OHR team. So it showed actually, if you set the bar really high, you have a big, hairy, audacious goal that you think is impossible, you can actually achieve it sometimes. And I think we really, absolutely hit the mark with this. So it's possible. And I think that will also inspire others in our team, because we have lots of other similar, very ambitious goals that we're trying to hit. So that was great. I think clearly, resourcing is an issue, and that's one of the things we're going to have to think about also in terms of scalability, because we want to broaden this out across UNDP for sure. If I'm even more ambitious, I'd like to propose this as an offer across the UN system, as we currently do for our junior professional officers program, because I think we're doing something quite unique here, and we've proved the concept. So I hope others will buy into it. But again, we're going to have to, really think a bit more in advance about the resourcing, and try and again, at least we've put all of the things in place now in terms of the assessments and the methodology and the criteria, so we won't have to do that again. The one thing I think we need is a brand for this. I think calling it a graduate program does it a disservice. It's very boring, doesn't say very much. If anyone has any great ideas for what we could call it, I'd be happy to buy the winner a drink if they ever find their way to Manhattan.
Their ticket to New York.
Yeah, well, yes. I can't go quite that far, but no, that would be great. We've actually asked our own team if anyone has any inspiration, and we'll do that also across UNDP. But I think it doesn't do it justice. And the other thing is, I think, is what we can see with this, with Gen Z, or they call it here, or Gen Z as I call it, the power of the UN brand and how purpose driven people talk about, how purpose driven the next generation workforce is. And I think that's one of, that's some of the things that we can really capitalize on in organizations like the UN. We're not going to be, offering Wall Street salaries, but what we offer is one of the best purposes that you can find, in the world today. And we saw how much hunger there is for that. People want to be part of it. And in our EVP that we put together, we talk about joining a life-changing mission. And clearly we can see that that is incredibly appealing to talented people right across the world.
Fabulous. I bet there's people right now thinking, yeah, I think I would like to apply. I'm going to end with Mavis, but Stephen, anything that, as you reflect on the project, any key learnings? Obviously, as a team, you've met many times to discuss this, but any key learnings and thoughts for the future?
Yeah, and I can be very brief here. I know we want to get to questions from the audience. So I think the project was profoundly successful. We met the diversity requirements, the validity requirements. I think the team's learning, Mavis, we did a reflection meeting. I think it was really about how to best pass data and how to best sync up our teams, right? Our teams are all over the world. There's lots of people behind Mavis and I, maybe less so for Mavis, but lots of, people involved. But I think knowing, how to pass the data, the different data points that Mavis and team were interested in, because we collected a lot of information on people. So we did, virtual, videos, lots of, different data points that Mavis and, and her team wanted access to as they started to get down to the final list of candidates. So I think being able to anticipate better their needs, and we knew this was going to be our reality. We talked about this early on, that we would look back and realize, we should do this different and that different. So that is all to say that I think it's more about project management and working together to anticipate the UN needs. And now that we have, one lap under our belt, we'll be much better able to predict their needs going forward.
Thanks, Stephen. And Mavis, there's a question in here from Imogen, and I think some of the learning's been covered, but she's also interested if there's any changes, anything that you would do differently.
Oh, lots. I imagine that I mean, first of all, I want to say that we're not quite through with the process, so it's a little premature. And if there's anybody who's listening in on there, we haven't even made the last offers. So, but looking, one big thing was that while having such a wide range of roles that we were recruiting for contributed to the diversity. It did make the selection process, I think, unduly complicated. So we would hope that for the next round of the pilot and in future, it could be more focused. It would also hopefully also mean fewer numbers, but that's not the reason. It's to be able to really be confident about the pool that we're attracting. And I just wanted to say, while we ended with 33 candidates, David, it wasn't because the 60 who reached the virtual assessment center or the 400 who reached the stage before couldn't have been equally part of the pool. I think it was Stephen, or perhaps it was Joel, who said that, you know, the bar was actually higher than what they tend to see elsewhere. So there really is very, very good talent out there. And I think if we're able to focus a little more on, you know, on fewer roles, we'll be able to then also make sure that those who are applying have a greater chance of being successful finally.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to hand to Stephen now to ask some of the questions that are coming through, and I think Livia in the Q&A is going to connect with you, David, because she has got a name for your program. So that might be the first drink bought. So just as I hand over to Stephen, thank you to the three of you for sharing the story so openly, and I hope everyone is kind of getting hints and tips and learning from what everyone's sharing. But Stephen, do you want to pick up a couple of the questions, and I'm happy to sit on the panel and jump in as well.
Sure, that'd be great. And actually just going to Livia's comments, because actually not everybody may have seen it, because I think the questions just come through to the panelists. Livia goes on to say that actually I'm really pleased to see that actually a purpose-driven organisation like the UN using tools that sometimes have only been exclusively used in the corporate arena. So I'm very pleased to see that. So I've got some questions here. I've got some of my own. So, but if you've got any questions, do pop them in. We've got another 8 minutes. So let me get stuck straight into these. The first one here is quite a specific one actually, and this was a comment saying, being aware. This is from Natanda, saying that some countries have more than one successful candidate. So she understands that 3 of the 33 were Malawians. And is there a reason for that? Was that standardization? Was it just that's who came through the process? So a little bit of insight into that would be appreciated.
Okay, I guess that's one I should take. I think David said at one point, and I hope I've also said it, that while diversity was really key, it was more important that people could do the job. So we want this to be a success. We want the candidates to be successful when they come on board. And we want also that the pilot is successful so that we get so that the buy-in that we've already got from the organization continues. So there were 3 from one country, there were 3 from another country, because the candidates that we had were capable. That's a very clear answer, that we have to be transparent in this. It's not just about bringing people on board who have a particular nationality. Otherwise, we wouldn't have needed to go through such a really rigorous test and put so many people through.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the process that we merit was the number one criterion.
Great. And just a question from me on that, actually, because you mentioned diversity, and I know that when we think about territory to territory, diversity does mean different things in different territories, and different countries have a different emphasis on certain aspects of diversity for very, very obvious reasons. And what social mobility might be high on the agenda in one country. I know some other countries where it's not even really a conversation at the moment. So I was just wondering about how you determined what aspects of diversity to focus on. And were there any challenges with that? Was it difficult in terms of getting to that kind of consensus?
I don't think it was difficult. I mean, we had discussions really internally, and there's clearly there's a diversity agenda within the UN, and so we are clearly looking at different measures there. Gender and geographical diversity are often some of the ones that are first and foremost, and people then go to. But we wanted to go beyond that. That was a discussion really, in terms of what we thought diversity should mean within the organization, and to try and really find a link to the purpose of UNDP, right? Which is about delivering practical programs that will help people in program countries. And I thought our thinking process was really that if you can find people who could be the sorts of parts of the population that would have been real beneficiaries, and to bring that perspective into the organization. And if we're talking about people helping people in areas where there's quite a lot of adversity that people face, that if you have people that have at least have some experience of having to overcome some obstacles in their own life, it probably leads you to have more empathy and understanding for others. And I thought that would be a great thing to bring to the table for UNDP.
Great, thanks, David. I've seen one of the questions, Stephen, that you've answered it here around actually the use of language. I know, David, in a previous life, he told me how to translate tests into 28 different languages, which was a rather stressful exercise. So Stephen's answered that question, so we don't need to elaborate on that one, English being the language of the programme. Another question that came in here, and that's about...
Can I just say...
Oh, sorry, yeah, please.
Sorry to interrupt you, Stephen.
That's all right, no,
no, because UNDP does have other working languages, but we decided that for the purpose of the pilot, we were testing so many other things anyway, that because English is the global language, that was what we would start with.
So does that mean that might change in the future?
It could be. I don't know.
Great. Okay. Watch this space. Thanks. So I had another question here, and that was because I know you talked a little bit about this, Mavis, but I was asking about what kind of things you're doing to help candidates to be successful, and actually were there anything that individuals who faced challenges participating, maybe candidates with a disability, and what sort of support were you able to provide in these cases?
Yes, I think I mentioned that we did have a couple of candidates who were not able to complete one exercise or another. For one, and of course, disability covers many things. So we ensured, or through Capfinity, we ensured that the testing could be was accessible for those who need things to be read out to them for visual impairment and so on. And where we encountered difficulties, or where they encountered difficulties and informed us, we either modified or made the test more basic so that it could meet those requirements, or we found a parallel that Stephen and team were able to very, very quickly come up with, that would still produce the same results in what we were looking for of the competencies in another way.
Great, thank you. We've got some questions. I'm constantly running out of time, so some questions are coming through thick and fast. So let's see if we can get through a few of them quickly. So a question here around, and this crossed my mind actually, knowing that actually one of the great things about having a diverse process, you can get lots of candidates, but of course that means that you've said no to well over 30,000 people, which is always a challenge. So any thoughts around actually how you, because I know you had some great comments about people that were ejected from the process and still had a positive experience. Was that the same at different stages, or was there anything that you can do with some of those candidates that weren't successful, matching them to other jobs maybe within the UN, or is that something that you might look to in the future?
Well, maybe. I mean, we hope that it may be possible over time to give contracts to more than the initial cohort, so that the door is not kind of slammed shut there, and it may be that we're able to open this to one or more different parts of the UN system. So if we can still make use of some of the very talented people that didn't quite get into the top 33, but nonetheless are more than good enough, then we'd be looking at ways of doing that for sure.
And I think one more just before we wrap up, and I know this is a horrible question because I get asked it sometimes and it's quite a difficult one to answer, but I think it might be worth asking for this program, and it's around what are the special success factors that did make it the candidates successful in this program? You know, is there something in particular? You know, I think back to my corporate life, and often it was that level of commercial awareness that made the star candidates stand out. Is there anything around there that maybe people who are talking to other people who might be interested in this program in the future, you know, that is that really key thing that made that somebody in that top 33 stand shoulders above the rest?
I actually think that that's a bit premature at the moment, simply because we haven't analysed to that level of granularity, but it is needed, and also just so that we're sure that, again, our testing is not having any adverse impact. So it's a very relevant question, and I think just the fact that our EVP has been showcased in such a way that UNDP is now, I believe, more out there. There are more people who are interested and who realize that they might actually have a chance. I think that alone is really a key win for us, and hopefully also for the candidates as well. And once we've analyzed things a lot more, I mean, we're really very interested in making sure that we can also, for the next cohort, just guide people and let them know what it is that they can focus on. But commitment is a big one, I have to say.
Great. Thanks, Mavis. I think last time I'm conscious we've run over the hour now. I can see that people are obviously having to drop off for the next Zoom or Teams call, no doubt, that they need to get onto. Nikki, anything you want to say to wrap up, or is there any way of, or you would like to just point out how people can get in touch with you if they want to find out more about the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, so when you get the slide decks, you'll see my LinkedIn and email, and other information is available on the website, which is www.capfinity.com. And I think I can speak on all of the panelists. Please keep in touch. This is an emerging story. We'd love your thoughts. We've got one program name already come through this. If you're listening back to the recording and you've got another, then please shoot it over to David. But thank you again for sharing the story, and we'll let you know how it evolves.
Yes, and I just echo that. So thank you also for giving your time, because I know how busy you all are. So it's much appreciated, and what a great case study. Actually, I think there's all sorts of learning for anybody that's thinking about global programs out there, because I know that's something we see. The pandemic has been a challenge for everybody, but we are still seeing more and more organisations, you know, whether it's in the corporate sector or the public sector, thinking globally and internationally about how they source candidates and how they sort of think about candidates crossing borders, and more and more global global programs I do see are coming onto the scene, and more global roles out there, interestingly. But that's a whole other topic we can go into at some other time. So thank you everybody. Thanks for the great content. And just to reinforce what Nikki said at the start, you will get an email back with a copy of the recording and the slides. So please do share that amongst your peers, and also catch up on anything that you want to regroup on. And as I said, the team will be more than happy for you to get in touch to explore this in a bit more detail. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day wherever you are in the world. So I won't say good afternoon or good evening, because it's probably very different things to different people. But thank you all very much for your time, and hope to talk to you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.